On today's episode, we analyze why a janitor doesn't make the same amount of money as a doctor. Take a look at a journalist's lack of introspection, learn about why breathing is not essential during a workout, as well as what color emojis we should be using, and finally, take on another bad take by our friend Robert Reich. This is Cringe Posts.
Hey friends, welcome to the Cringe Post podcast. This is the show where we gather the cringiest political and cultural takes in your feed, and we break them down and show where they went wrong, and have a little bit of fun along the way, both at their expense and our expense as well, as you will see in a minute. My name's Britt. I'm here with my co-host Donnie. Before we get rolling, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us out. And if you are listening on the audio-only format, we have a show companion that you can access at cringepost.com. You can kind of see all the different takes that we're doing. If we have videos or if there's memes or anything, it's on there. So just click on that link and it will take you to where you need to go. Before we get started looking at other people's cringes, we like to poke fun at ourselves. And today we're going to poke fun at Donnie. And he has got a post here from October 11th, 2012. And Donald tweeted, "Paul Ryan praising Medicare looks good. Just specify how you'll improve it." I liked Paul Ryan too, man. And I guess I don't know. I didn't really know anything about any of it. I just thought, wow, I guess he's handsome and seems composed. And compared to Joe Biden, he sure seems great.
The media calls him a budget hawk. So that's,
yes.
If CNN's calling him a budget hawk, he has to be good, right? I like how... There's so much wrong and naive in this post. Obviously, him praising Medicare looks good. Like that's stupid.
Yeah. Who cares?
Him praising Medicare does not look good. And it's funny because even from an optic standpoint, I don't think Ryan praising Medicare looks good either to the Republican base.
No.
Maybe the Republican base was in a much different place in 2012, but I can't think that would, or 2011, I suppose, 2011. I can't think that would have looked appealing then either. I don't remember the specific context of what he said in the debate, but
it was probably like, because wasn't there some stuff like with the Romney care and all? I don't know. Maybe he had to like toe that line in some way.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. And then I also just like the naive optimism of just specify how you'll improve it. Like,
as if they would ever do that.
Just explain your great plan that you definitely have and is not made up and, will actually improve. Like this sort of blind trust that he says he's going to improve it. He says, Medicare's a good thing and he can fix it. So just tell us how, Paul Ryan. Just tell us how, because you said you know how to. So just let us know.
It's just like Elizabeth Warren. I've got a plan for that. It's like, okay, then show us, please.
Yeah. It's the Office when they're trying to replace Michael Scott and Will Arnett's character is on there, and he's like, I think it's like a 3 or a 5-step plan to get the company back on track. They're like, great, what's the plan? He's like, is that a joke? Because if I give you the plan, then you'll have it, and then you won't hire me. But I can't tell you the plan unless you hire me. Then we'll have the plan. They're like, well, how do we know you have a plan? He's like, well, trust me, I wouldn't lie about having a plan.
I'll give you half of a part of half of a step.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just like...
Color-coded binders.
It's like, right. It's just like, come on. Like, of course Paul Ryan's got a plan to fix Medicare. Just tell us what it is now. So, yeah, I think that's pretty bad as any cringe can get.
Yeah, Republican Donald and Britt are some of our favorite self-cringes, so...
Absolutely.
There'll be a few more of these, I'm sure, in the future.
Hopefully not for my sake, but hopefully for your sake, the viewer, yes.
All right, moving on to our first Not Us cringe. We have got a Twitter user, and they write, "To be honest, I actually don't have any issues with a janitor making the same amount of money as a doctor." Hey, here's the thing. I don't have an issue with that either, but it's not feasible. So, we're not talking about reality, right? I could go right now to basically any school district here in Washington State because they need janitors, and I could apply for a job as a janitor, and if I said, please also pay me $200,000, they would say no. And the reason why is because they would let me have the job as a janitor with no education background, maybe even no experience, and I could probably even show up, looking, like in workout clothes or something, and probably get the job because it's like it doesn't have any, prior requirements for it. To be a doctor, you've got to have, at least 12 years of education plus a lot of other experience and, internship and residency and all these other things. And it costs a lot of money, right? So at the very minimum, a doctor has to recoup 12 years of school worth of cost, plus being paid a lot less. And then they also work a lot more hours, right, than a janitor would. So it's just not feasible, right? Because no one would be a doctor if they weren't able to recoup the cost. And no place would be clean because you couldn't afford to clean it.
Well, yeah, that's it. This person is very, very detached from, again, the idea of economics, the idea of money and what it's, maybe not the dollar specifically because of inflation and printing money, but the idea of, a token of currency and what it represents and what ideally it's the value of it is supposed to mean. When they say things like, I don't mind them making the same, it's like, well, I don't mind either, but who's going to pay that? If someone's willing to pay their janitor that much, well then, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Neither of us are saying
the cost comes out somewhere. That's the problem.
Right. Well, it's like you and I aren't saying no one should be allowed to pay the janitor that much, right? Like, sure, if someone's very, very wealthy, they have tons of money coming in and they choose to pay their staff that rate, well, good for them. That's fine. But the point is that the wealth has to come from somewhere and it has to be earned and deserved. And so like you're saying with the two examples, it's like it has nothing to do with how hard a job is or how difficult or painful or strenuous, because being a janitor is not a fun job. Like there's a lot of hard work that goes into cleaning and taking care, especially if you're talking about like a public school where people treat public property like absolute crap because there's no cell phone or there's no individual ownership of things. So you put in a lot of work, and I have a lot of respect for people who are doing that. Like they're doing difficult, hard work. The thing is, the barrier to entry is low, right? Like you said, with a doctor, you've got 12 years of school that you have to recoup, not only in costs, but just like to be able to do the things that a doctor does. So like you can have two very equally dedicated, hardworking people, and they can each want to be a doctor. But if one of them just doesn't have the knowledge for it, regardless of the intelligence, like maybe they're smart enough to do it, but they don't have the knowledge and they haven't put in the 12 years of training to be able to do those sorts of things, then you quite literally can't have two doctors there. And so that's the difference, right? It's like the whole supply and demand type analogy, but with labor forces where, if there's a ton of supply of people able to do the janitorial work, even if it's hard, well, then that necessarily is going to lower the cost of how much you're going to be able to pay them because there's a lot of supply, whereas there's a lot fewer people who have the training and ability to be a doctor on the market. So of course the cost for that increases, and that has nothing to do with even the idea of deserving or earning, other than just the pragmatic reality of a job being able to be done or not. And I think there's also arguments to be made in terms of value and stuff like that and scarcity. But I'm just saying, just from a very logical level, like if you'd have fewer people able to be doctors based on whatever metrics that you have, then they are necessarily going to be paid more because they are more scarce. And if you don't pay them more, they will choose something that is not as difficult to do. It's kind of that simple.
It's you should ask this person. If I met this person in real life and we're having this conversation, I'd say, okay, like that's fine. Would you be willing to pay, $8 for a half a bucket of French fries, at McDonald's or whatever, when it's normally whatever is like $2.50 or whatever it is nowadays? And it's like, oh no, like you can't do that, right? Because like the average cost, like that janitor's salary, if you paid the janitor $300,000 a year, that cost is going to be distributed over the operating cost of whatever building they're maintaining, and that operating cost must be recouped somewhere. So someone is going to pay it, right? And like these people have this imaginary world where you can raise wages while also not raising prices, and not just this person, but some educated folks that we'll get to here at the end of the episode also believe that. It's like, no, it's like you don't live in reality. Like there's a cost for everything; it must be recouped. And we've talked about this example before on here, but like when you compare when you factor in the amount of hours of training, the amount of extra cost for school, and the amount of hours worked, doctors and teachers on a per hour basis make about the same. when you compare their over lifetime earnings. That doesn't mean that a doctor doesn't make significantly more overall in their lifetime. I think they make maybe double or triple what a teacher does, but on a per hour basis, when factoring with all those other factors, they make about the same as a teacher. And surprise, surprise, it's because the doctor needs to recoup all the costs of becoming a doctor. And also, their service is just much more valuable, and there's more costs associated with being able to offer it. So you can't live in a reality like this where it's just not tenable, right? And these people won't understand that. I hope that someday they do. But yeah, unless you want to be paying $50,000 for a T-shirt, it's not going to be possible.
Yeah, there are some, posts we look at where a lot of our arguments sort of come from sometimes ethical, but more just in general value type arguments, right? Saying things that have to do with incentive structures and what you as a human have a right for and stuff. But then there are posts that are, I think, like this post is sort of
just
operating in that basis, right? It's in that sort of making a value claim, I would say. It's, I don't have a problem with a janitor making as much as a doctor. It's a value thing. It's saying that I want to live in a society where, we don't look down on janitors and praise doctors as better than the other. You know what I mean? That's kind of the vibe I get from this post. It's a very value statement, but the problem is it's a value statement that is entirely contradictory with just the way that reality operates, like we've been saying, in the same way that I can say just as much as I want, you know what? I actually don't mind if I don't grow potatoes and put them out on my farm and I still am able to eat potatoes. I don't mind that world, where the person who works and the person who doesn't work, where they both get to eat. I don't mind that world. And it's like, well, okay, but there are realities and,
that's a good point.
Sure, the argument you're making implies a lot more of cause and effect than you would like to believe. Now, of course, they will always just retreat to the tax the rich line, which we again will tackle a little bit later, I think. But they don't really think about the unintended consequences of things and the fact that, again, these value statements have actual real world implications of why they don't work or why things are the way that they are, or if you force the system to make it work, the cost comes somewhere or some other thing will offset and balance it.
Oh, that's great. You gonna move to the next one?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. We've got 2 blue check marks for this one. One is Matthew Rosenberg, and then the other is Ida Bay Wells. And Matthew Rosenberg tweets, Joe Rogan is what he is. We in the media might want to spend more time thinking about why so many people trust him instead of us. Well said, Matthew. That's not the cringe part. Ida Bay Wells then responds to Matthew, with respect, I don't get this. We need to understand why millions of Americans don't mind the open racism. It's not a mystery. Been reporting on it for years. So what do we do with that? I mean, as all of the Joe Rogan cringe post and takes we've seen, this person has probably never ever listened to a Joe Rogan podcast, and it always gets me too, like when people like I don't know if you saw the bit where it's like Trevor Noah is making fun of Joe Rogan, and it's like, dude, like 6-7 years ago, people were trying to cancel you because you made some kind of jokes that didn't land well, and Joe stuck up for you, right? Like, I don't know. Anyone that listens to Joe Rogan's podcast knows the guy is not a racist. We all know this is just a political hit job, and it's only motivated by Big Pharma trying to make us take one of their products, and they're unhappy that the news media that they've hired, the corporate media, is not able to change our minds because more people collectively listen to Joe Rogan than the collective corporate media, and that's all it is. And I'm glad. I was kind of bummed when Joe came out and like kind of apologized, because it's like okay, like, I get it. Like, maybe you don't like what you did. And he had reasoning for like, hey, if you do something you regret, you should apologize for it. I get that. But I was very happy on his next episode of his podcast where he's like, yeah, that was just a political hit job. Like, that's all it was. And I'm going to apologize for something I regret, but I'm not going to change how I operate. And that's what I think is important, is a lot of people will self-censor or change how they operate when the cancel mob comes for them. And Joe has got that FU money, right? So he doesn't have to do that. And Spotify's not going to kick him off. And even if they did, everyone would follow him wherever he went. So
to Rumble specifically, where they literally offered him the $100 million over what, 4 years or something.
Yeah, I think that's about what his Spotify deal was, maybe, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's another $100 million, right?
Yeah.
Just so that we are clear, actually, Ida Bay Wells is a historical figure. That's her name on Twitter. It is Nicole Hannah Jones.
Nicole Hannah Jones. Okay.
Who is the author of the 1619 Project book, that whole ordeal. So, she runs the Ida Bay Wells Society, I believe, or that's her site. So that's why she has that name on Twitter. But yeah, it's Nicole Hannah Jones for those of you who are familiar with her. And it's, I just love this because it is, I mean, it's Matthew Rosenberg making the observation that a lot of us have made, and I mean, good for him for making it, right? I think oftentimes where you are situated, the context in where you reside makes certain things harder to grasp. So, like, if you're a corporate news media journalist who has gone through journalism school and, at least in your own mind, taken this sort of vow of these standards of journalism and reporting and all these kinds of things. I can understand this perspective where they kind of look down on someone like Joe Rogan, right? They're from sort of they're tall. Like, I've gone through all the proper channels. I make sure that I abide by all these rules, even if they don't, or the rules are inherently sucky. But so the fact that this guy is able to say, we need to be a little bit more introspective. That's
awesome.
Really big. Like, him saying that means more than me, because I'm down here I'm on the ground level. Of course I can see that, right? But when you've climbed that high, sometimes introspection in that kind of way can be tough. So good for him for making that claim. And then Nicole Hannah Jones is like, I see what you're saying there, and I don't understand. Why would we be introspective against all these racists? I already know all about them. It's not a mystery. I've been reporting on this for years. They're racist.
Self-reflection bad.
Yeah, he's like, hey, maybe instead of just calling everyone racists, we should ask ourselves why they don't trust us. No, it's because they're racists. It's like, that's exactly what he's calling out, and I'm not sure. I could be wrong here, but I think this tweet is actually deleted from her, because I saw this and I'd seen it on my timeline, and then I wanted to go and find it as a single screenshot from the Matthew Rosenberg one, and I couldn't find it. Maybe it was just because Twitter buried it or something like that. But if it was deleted, which I kind of hope it is, only because it, that there's some level of her recognizing it was a faux pas or a goof. Because, ultimately, I would love it if Nicole Hannah Jones came around. I don't think she will, but I would love it if she did. But yeah, this just made me laugh out loud when I saw it, because it's literally like saying, maybe instead of, blaming racists, we should stop hammering our thumbs with our hammers. And then someone saying, no, I don't get it. These racists are the ones who are making our thumbs bleed. What are you talking about? And it just so missed his point to a comical degree. I couldn't help but throw this in here.
Yeah, like, and in the exact opposite way, right? It's like this is why we don't trust you. And that's what's crazy, like, kind of to your point, like, it's almost beyond hope for some people like this, right? Because they're caught in some circular logic, right? Where it's like, oh, like, people don't like us. Well, they don't like us because they are racist, right? And it's like, well, we don't like you because you just say that whenever you want to get out of something or you want to push your agenda. And that's what makes it so cringe, right? It's just like, it's just clear. It's like it's a tool for you to put people in their place and marginalize them and not have to listen to what other people are thinking or not even think on your own, right? And yeah, I hope that they emerge from it, right? And I guess, you could look back at some of our past stuff and it's like, I don't know if I ever had like a position. Maybe I did. I had a position of wanting to be right? And that was like when you look at our conservative cringes and stuff like that. And so I guess, if we emerge from it, maybe Hannah Jones can as well.
Hey, Representative Walter Jones, he's always my example of someone who you wouldn't think would come around in a major way, but he voted for all the wars and stuff like that, and he was a representative from South Carolina, I believe. I believe it was South Carolina. And then after going, to a certain number of funerals of people from his district that he represented, and, more and more revelations came out about how they lied us, he became the most apologetic person for his votes. And he never stopped decrying the state until he passed away, I think 3 years ago today or yesterday. It was his birthday recently when he died. And so, like, someone, from South Carolina, from a military district, Republican politician. He was able to come around and become the most strident, anti-war, apologetic, and remorseful, but like in a healthy way, in a way where he was saying, I was wrong for this and I want to make it right. If that can happen to someone like a war hawk, like Walter Jones, bless him, I think, slim chances do exist for other people too.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah.
For everyone's sake at this point.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to our next one. We've got Charles Blow, and then someone else replies underneath him. And Charles Blow posted, went to my gym today. They have a mask mandate posted on the door, but most people weren't wearing them. I asked about the policy. They said, a mask is only required to enter. You could take it off while working out because you have to breathe. What? Looks like I need a new gym. And then someone, I'm glad he's going to the gym, but someone beneath him posted or replied, I have never understood this narrative. I work a strenuous retail job and keep a mask on for hours at a time while stocking, shelving, moving around constantly, and have no breathing problems. I also sing choral music, performed in a concert back in October where all singers were masked. It's like, okay, dude, like, good for you. You limited oxygen going to your brain, which apparently seems like it's probably going to continue to make you want to do that, right? Man, Charles Blow has some really bad articles. I don't know if you're familiar with any of his writing, but it's like, I remember I went climbing to Camp Muir on Mount Rainier last summer. And it's like, okay, you're basically out in the middle of the wilderness. There's I think there's like, a couple hundred people that are going to make that climb that day. And, my buddy and I are out there at 4 a.m, climbing up, a couple miles up into the sky essentially, and no one around, the freshest of air that you can get. And it's strenuous and exhausting. You've got a pack on, and lo and behold, there are people with masks on. And I just like, this is not a good thing to do. Like when you're exercising, to have so much carbon, going into your, all of the stuff that you're exhaling, all that waste that you're supposed to get out of your body is just being trapped and put back inside you. And you're also restricting how much airflow you can actually breathe in. Not to mention that you're on the side of a mountain with no one around you, and there's literally zero chance you're going to catch COVID. It's like, and maybe this person, Charles Blow, has a little bit of a reason for like, oh, if you buy into all this stuff, like, crap, if I'm going to the gym, I'm going to be around people. But at least acknowledge, dude, that like it's not good to work or do strenuous activity, whether you're in a grocery aisle stocking shelves or if you're on a treadmill or on the side of a mountain, to have a mask on and restrict your breathing. That's kind of important for living, is breathing.
Well, there's so much I like about this, but I didn't when I originally screen capped this, I just thought it was kind of on surface level funny because of a bunch of the reasons you listed and stuff. But when I look at the date of it now, it is even more funny. So it was on December 31st of 2021, and it is currently in February of 2022. So it's just been about a month and a half-ish or so, just quite under that. In that time, almost every single state, including New York, which I don't know if he works out of or if he's just a New York Times writer, I don't know, but every single state except for 4 of them, which unfortunately Washington State is one of these 4, has announced or has already lifted mask mandates indoors. And so this person is so married to this ideology that even a month before, that even New York State and California and Oregon are saying, yeah, you don't need to wear a mask indoors anymore. That it doesn't work. He's still like, what? People aren't wearing a mask in the gym? It's like, yeah, and anywhere else indoors pretty soon because states are lifting the mandates,
That's a good point.
It's just really funny to me because, again, I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but the useful idiots, and maybe he's not a useful idiot, maybe he's part of the regime putting this forward intentionally, but I don't know. He seems more like a pawn in this kind of tweet. But the people who've bought in, the true believers of this rhetoric, are behind the times with midterms where people are very fed up with this. And so now all the people in political power are like, oh crap, we have elections coming up and we don't want the Republicans to win. So we're going to undo these mask mandates, right? So they're behind on the curve. And so even a month before, they're like, what do you mean you're not wearing a mask in the gym of all places? Where, as you highlighted, it's very important that you breathe, for your health. And so they're behind on it. And so, this kind of thing shocks them. But don't worry, now that the states have ended it, as soon as the CDC comes around, then they'll be okay with it again. And it's like, you guys really just want to be spoon-fed what to think. And that, to me, is crazy. It's wild. The other thing about this is the second the second post where the guy's like, I work a strenuous
enslaved.
job. Yeah, and it's like, I have to keep my mask on while stalking, and I sing choral music where everyone was masked, and it's like, whoop-de freaking do. I don't care.
They've just associated the reason, this guy thinks it's a virtue because it's like they've associated wearing a mask with a virtue, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, despite all of this hardship, so hard to sing with the, it's like, dude, if I could literally save someone's life, if I knew that was the case and it worked, which it doesn't, and it's all come out that it doesn't. But if I knew I could save someone's life by wearing a mask, yeah, everyone would wear it, dude. You're not a hero for doing that. You're doing what any reasonable person would do. And that's just what drives me crazy. The problem is all the people that are telling us this is what's important, they don't actually believe it, right? Did you see
Stacey Abrams?
Yes.
Yep.
Stacey Abrams, who her biggest risk for COVID-19 is that she's overweight. It's like, dude, you should go to the gym because, if you're overweight, you're more likely to die from COVID. But she's sitting in a room full of school children she's reading her book. I can't remember what it's called. It's something ridiculous, but she's reading her book. All the school children are masked and she is not. She does not believe in it, and then when people called her out, she blamed it on racism, of course. And then I was listening just today to an episode of Tim Pool, and he had Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene on. And they pointed out, they said, yeah, all of the Congress people, the only time they wear masks is in areas where there are actual cameras. They don't wear masks. If you walk around the hallways that don't have cameras or anything like that, no one wears masks in there because none of them believe in it, right? You look at those folks, you look at Nancy Pelosi at the hair salon, they don't actually believe what they're trying to force you to do. They've
Gavin
got rules
Newsom
for you.
at the sports game.
Yeah. What was the other guy? Mayor Garcetti held his breath, right?
Yeah, well, did you see, what's his face? Gavin Newsom's excuse was that he was holding his mask close to his face. And it's like, yeah, he's holding it like this. You're like, oh yeah, you're ready to snap it right back on.
It's the same line of logic for I need to wear a mask to go sit at a table and take it off to eat. So it's the proximity of the mask, I guess, keeps you safe. It's a force shield.
Think about how the media was highlighting and ridiculing. And look, I'm not above some politician ridicule. I don't care what political team they're for. If you've got a reason to ridicule a politician, I'll probably like it. Let's be real. But they were highlighting and ridiculing Governor Christie when he was sitting on the closed beach, right? It was public beach closed and he was sitting on it and enjoying it, right?
That was pretty funny.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, fine. They made such a huge deal about that. But now when there's, things that are one, breaking their own policies like Christie, but two, in a quote unquote life-saving manner that you've, boomed the whole public over. Now it's all of a sudden, well, we need to justify, we need to, it's like, okay, you made fun of, rightfully so, Christie for sitting on a beach. No one's life was in danger there, or you weren't claiming any lives were in danger there. But now, when it comes back to you, on this whole thing that you've claimed is life-threatening, all of a sudden it's here's the full context of it, sort of. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, they don't. No one. It's the emperor with who has no clothes, right? No one actually believes this stuff. Only people people are just scared to be left out, right? And that's why it only matters when it's in front of the cameras. So
it is the emperor's new mask,
Yeah.
He's not wearing a mask. It's no. This is the N96. It's just very, very hard to see.
It's the space shuttle helmet. All right, moving on to our next one. We've got an NPR article. The article is titled, "Which skin color emoji should you use? The answer can be more complex than you think." And then the tweet that they use, or the text for the tweet that he used to push this article out says, some white people may choose this thumb emoji, tan emoji, thumbs up, because it feels neutral. But some academics argue that opting out of the white thumbs up emoji signals a lack of awareness about white privilege, akin to society associating whiteness with being raceless. I can't deal with this one, man. This one is so ridiculous.
It's the
and the article's ridiculous too, folks. If you want to go read it, you can.
Yeah, it's an NPR, so you know it's going to be ridiculous. Well, the yellow thumbs up color, that the one they're talking about, they think that feels neutral. Well, the whole reason it's yellow is because the emoji faces by default have been yellow, and the whole reason they've been yellow is because the cartoon smiley face that
has been yellow.
It's just been yellow. And there was nothing racial about making this cartoon smiley face that just for whatever reason sort of became the vernacular of smiley faces. I don't know when that was a thing, but that's where original emojis were derived from, was just like, oh, yellow smiley face, we'll make that, and then we'll make other faces. Then it's like, oh, let's do a thumbs up. What color should it be? Well, I mean, the smiley face is yellow, so it has nothing to do with race, and then they have to make it into race. But then they're criticizing you for using the default sort of raceless yellow because you're opting out of using white, which signals a lack of awareness about white privilege. And it's like, what? It's the most backwards thing. It's because they're saying that you trying to be neutral instead of embracing your race is racist. Even though I'm pretty sure that we've been told that if I were to flagrantly in your face use the emoji that is my skin tone, that would be showing my white privilege and making a statement about the color of my race instead of using the default color. Like, there's so much contradictory things about this, one way or the other. Shout outs to my mom, who texted me literally today, and she made some joke about that. Like, oh, I should use the default emoji face. And she's like, is it white privilege that I am using the wrong color here? And I was like, I don't know if you actually read this NPR article or not, but yeah, I just saw this as a thing. So,
to kind of steel man their argument, I like to be up to date on all these things. And I read, a while back, I read White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. And the book obviously is just a whole bunch of crock. But there is one thing in there that I was like, okay, I can kind of understand how this is an argument for like how it being like, oh, well, I don't see color being kind of like a not so great thing. And she gives this example of like, hey, if there's a white mom and her kid shopping in the supermarket, and then the kid is in the cart and points to a black man and says, "Mommy, why is that man's skin black?" And then the mom hushes the child, is like, "No, don't point that out." That it's like, oh, you're kind of like inferring to the child that like skin color, the black skin color is bad. Right. So yeah. I can see that, right? That's
sure.
I get that, and it's in the same way, with a disability. It's like, no, you shouldn't tell a kid, don't point that out. You should explain, hey, kid, like, yeah, that guy doesn't have use of his legs, right? Like, sometimes things like that happen, and then the kid will be like, oh, okay. But that still is like, that's separate from the conversation of, oh, I'm a racist if I randomly, when I'm highlighting the emoji on my iPhone and I accidentally choose the white one versus the yellow one versus the tan one or the most dark one. It's like, dude, just like use whatever makes sense in the moment, like let people live their life. Like let's not be aware and have to tiptoe around all these different things, right? Like I don't want to ever infer that a person is bad because of their race, and that it should. I mean, I think that's the underlying kind of message that all these folks talk about with like MLK, and I think that we all should get to. We'd be a really great society. It's like, I will never infer that someone is bad simply because of their race, and I want to be unaware of that when determining someone's character. They're saying the exact opposite of that with this article. They're saying be hyper aware of and that's how you determine, someone's action based on their skin color is good or not. It's like, well, people can do this action because they're this skin color, but people can't do this action because of their skin color. That is the opposite of what is a just and good society will be.
So you're exact. I think you absolutely nailed it with the hyper awareness being brought to things where it's really irrelevant. So like the example you bring from White Fragility, where it's like, why is his skin black? Obviously you don't shut up the kid, but shh, we can't talk about that. Like, of course different races, different people, whatever. But it would be an entirely different thing if the kid was like, why is that man tall? And then you're like, Well, you see, black people tend to be really, really tall. You're like, what? Where did that come from, right? You're like bringing race into something that really doesn't necessarily belong. And that to me is the exact kind of thing with the emoji, where it's like, no one cared about emoji race until people started thinking that the yellow color was too similar to white or whatever. And now it's just like, well, people who don't want to hyperfixate on race, they just use the yellow one because it's sort of universal. It's just default. It's just like whatever. Like, this color of that no one actually, people sort of in the, yellow is sort of used for Asian, but like no one has like a saturated yellow, like cartoony yellow skin color, really. That's not really what they're trying to communicate.
Unless you got some sort of problem with your body, but yeah.
Right, yeah. But it's like, as generally speaking, of course, although I do know generalizations are cancelable these days. But, the point is that, like, if you're just trying to use an emoji, you're not trying to make any kind of comment on skin tone. You're not trying to say, I as a white man am giving a thumbs up, or you as a black person are giving a thumb. You're not making statements like that. You're just communicating through a emoji, That's, you just hit the button and it's just the default color or whatever. That's all people are doing. But NPR is like, no. Hold on. You're tapping that button. Here, let me bring race into this. Let me tell you why what you've just done is a racist thing. And it's like, that couldn't be further from my mind when I'm tapping the default emoji thing. I'm not tapping and holding and choosing my race color. I'm not setting all those defaults. I don't care. And when I send an emoji, I'm not making a statement about who I am or what my ethnicity is. It's just such a hyper racialization over the most insignificant and stupid thing. It makes me kind of irritated, even though it's such a stupid, goofy article.
Yeah, and that National Public Radio, like, dude, come on.
Yeah, seriously.
All right.
I can't think of anything that I've enjoyed from them in a while. I used to listen to them because I don't know, they put out some music stuff I liked, but I don't know. NPR is...
Yeah, the Tiny Desk concerts are pretty good.
Yeah, I like that. Sweet. But anytime they try to touch on anything more than music, I'm a little
I think you and I both had the same college professor, but she taught communications class, and she was obviously very, very biased. And when she would talk about, like, hey, you need to use unbiased sources, sources like NPR, like I almost fainted right there. And Huffington Post.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Very unbiased.
Yeah, that's very middle of the pack.
Yeah, that's just straight up news.
Well, the three pillars of unbiased reporting, of course, Huffington Post, NPR, and CNN, the three staples.
Yeah.
You can count on Brian Stelter to hold everyone accountable to objective media.
Did you see Russell Brand's impersonation of it? It was so funny, man. It was so funny.
Oh, gosh.
All right, moving on to our last one. We've got a pretty common feature here. Cringe creator is the term that I've coined for him. Robert Reich. And then we've got Pramila Jayapal as well, both talking about Starbucks. So Robert Reich wrote, Starbucks is raising prices again, blaming supply chain issues and labor costs. Meanwhile, Starbucks CEO's total compensation rose 39% in 2021 to $20.4 million. Do not be fooled. This is about corporate greed. It always is. And then Pramila wrote, despite soaring profits, Starbucks is raising prices again. We can't accept this level of corporate greed as the status quo. Tax the rich and make sure every single worker in America can join a union. So, okay, first off, to address Robert Reich, it's like, so Robert, Robbie, Bob, whatever you want to be called, would you dispute that there's been supply chain issues and labor costs in the past 2 years? Because I think there was like this whole thing about, I could see ships when I drove by Everett, like ships sitting out in the ocean and being told that there are computer chip shortages and all sorts of different issues that can't get here. So there's definitely a supply chain issue. And when a product, especially that's perishable, sits out or isn't delivered on time, that adds cost. Would you also dispute, we've had labor issues where people are not working, and when you have to hire more people or you have to hire people in an inefficient way, that adds cost. So it's like, okay, dude, your point is null, right? Like prices have to raise because Starbucks operating net operating profit margin is 13%. That's not a lot of room, right? That's 13%. So if you have the overall product raised 5%, in cost, and you have labor costs going up, 15% or whatever it is, that basically eats away all the profit margin, and you have to make a profit, as we've talked about on the show before. The thing that always gets me about this guy, though, is he always talks about like, ooh, CEOs get paid so much. It's like, dude, Starbucks employs like 400,000 people. So if you took away that 39% raise that the Starbucks CEO got, which he probably deserves, right, for managing the company through the pandemic, like you could raise the hourly wage of an average Starbucks employee. I think it was like 5 cents. So great, dude. Like not even 5 cents. I think it's $17 for the year, right? So $17 divided by a full-time salary, right, or full-time working load. It's like, yeah, that's not the problem, man. I'll let you take on the other if you want, or both.
Yeah. Well, just to tack on to that last point, a point we've made in the past has been that like, if a CEO is able to keep a company profitable in the face of hard years, right, then it benefits all of the employees to retain that CEO. So the CEO getting a raise, even as costs increase, is a good thing for creating a profitable Starbucks, right? Like a Starbucks that is going to be sustainable, one that is like oh great, they didn't raise their prices and they didn't raise their CEO's salary, but next year they're out of business because it was unsustainable, and then everyone loses their jobs and you don't have drinks. You know what I mean? Like the CEO getting a raise, even though it's not a natural assumption you'd come to, is a good thing for workers and a good thing for you as a consumer. There's obviously a balance to things, right? There's always going to be, there is a point of overpaying a CEO, but usually what happens there is that then the balance strikes somewhere else.
Yep.
Then you overpay the CEO and it's not profitable enough, or it's not compelling enough. People either leave or people don't buy the products, what have you. There's a balance somewhere, and maybe it's not perfect, but it's not something that you can just mandate by government or have the government come in and set the tax rate at the perfect rate to make sure that corporate greed is leveled. Like it's not this. The whole point of the market is that it's responsive to things. So a CEO in a difficult time that's able to keep Starbucks profitable, but Starbucks has to adjust accordingly with their prices, and yet the CEO gets a raise. Well, it makes sense because he's able to manage that, and if he's not, he'll probably be gone. Yeah. So that just, when you're bringing up, oh, he got so much more, it's like, I'm actually surprised Starbucks isn't raising their prices more, all things considered. And so then Pramila Jayapal comes in with her take again, and it's funny because she doesn't even address the CEO raise, which that to me is the more compelling point, or at least the bigger pitfall that I could see someone stumbling in, I guess. The more compelling, like, why someone might agree with Robert Reich. She just says, despite soaring profits, they're raising prices again. It's like, yeah, do you think something happened? Do you think inflation, totals have been hit? Do you think that, it was maybe a hard last 2 years for some reason? I don't know. It's just, it really made me laugh that it's the Elizabeth Warren where
they've got to maintain those profits, dude.
Yeah, it's all about corporate greed, not about maintaining profits, Britt. No. Screw your profits. It's corporate greed. And then, of course, tax lawyer to make sure every American can join a union. Well, it's like, you don't care about workers joining a union for their own sake, or else you wouldn't have been so opposed to the Janus decision that lets people opt out of unions. Public sector employees used to have to join unions, and only until the Janus decision were you able to opt out of those. And it's like they fought against that. They hated the idea that you could opt out of joining the union. They don't want you to join the union for your own benefit for the worker. They want you to join the union because the union dues obviously increase with the more members they have, and the unions overwhelmingly bankroll Democrat politicians and big government supporters. So you don't care about the union being brought up to help the workers. You care about the union so that your own political campaign gets funded, you doofus.
It's so funny, man, with the whole thing with Canadian truckers up there, because a lot of the tow truck drivers and the commercial truckers belong to the same or, kind of an adjacent union. And when so the tow truck driver's like, nah, we're not going to get in the way of these guys protesting in Ottawa. And so it's like these Democrat and lefty types, like they're all about the workers of the world uniting and revolution and all this stuff until it's against the actual system that's established and in place, which they, are inevitably usually part of and reign over. And so, and it's kind of funny to me, I wonder how in her brain she gets from soaring profits to we need to tax the rich and that's going to help keep prices low at Starbucks. It's like, here in Seattle, we had the soda tax, and it's like, oh, well, if we, raise prices on things, people are going to not buy it as much, right? It's like, okay, so if people aren't buying as much Starbucks is cheap, right? The reason Starbucks is, I can't remember what it is. Like, I have to get oat milk in my latte. So my price view of it is skewed by usually about $1. But let's say like a latte is like $5 or $6. Like at Starbucks, it's usually going to be like here in Seattle, it's going to be $8 down the street at like a one-off coffee shop because they don't have the scale that Starbucks has. And so it's like, okay, what's going to happen when you, one, make it more expensive for Starbucks to operate, and then two, reduce how many people are actually going to be buying stuff? It's like all prices are going to get higher. And that's the irony of all these folks' policies, right? Is it just the condition they are trying to mandate into effect or mandate away? All of their actions just end up making it way worse for the people that are the most helpless to be to stand against it. So it's just, the irony is just so rich, man. It's hard for me to, like, everyone makes that argument like we're living in a simulation or whatever, but it's like if you wanted to destroy society and like harm the weakest of us and the people that are just getting by, it's like these are the arguments you would make. But at the same time, they're saying we represent those people. It's like, oh, this is just, it's almost too much to bear.
It's interesting because, so much of the sort of tax the rich that comes from this ideology, it's the idea is you take money from the people who are just holding on to it and can't afford to be without this money, right? Like you're just taking a piece of just a chunk of gold out from this massive structure that will never be missed, and then you melt it down and you're giving it to the people on the bottom. That's kind of the vague idea. But the problem is that the way it gets distributed, best case scenario, back to the people is through very specific, structured, and manipulative means. And what I mean to say by that is like, unless you're doing something like the stimulus payment where every American gets $1,200 or $1,200 or whatever it was under a certain income level or what have you, which that's only happened, in my lifetime a couple times, either through tax cuts or through, again, that direct funding, and I think that that's bad. But what I would say is that that's at least a more direct allowance of me getting my money back, right? I get to take that money and then I get to say, okay, now that I have my money back from taxes, I get to spend it in these ways. But that's not what these people actually advocate for with these new taxes. They would, to me, it's like it would take a more honest person to be like, look, let's tax the rich at whatever percent and then give everyone under this level of income this much per month or something like that. Because at that point, you're giving people back wealth that you could argue the rich people are hoarding, and then you let people have access to be able to grow or to spend. But that's not what they advocate for. They advocate for government programs. They advocate for public works things. The amount taxed then becomes sort of reduced from the amount of it that is spent on processing it all through bureaucracies. Then two, it goes through all these slush funds of projects that the bureaucrats decide, not even the elected representatives, which would already be a step removed from what people want to spend these things on. Not even them. It's the unelected bureaucrats who determine how these things go, what budgets and things like that. And so you have all these levels of money going to bureaucrats and people who are well off in the name of helping poor people, but they don't ever get to see that money in ways that they might want it. Sure, you might create a new playground for them, but maybe this poor couple here doesn't benefit from that playground, and they much would have rather had $600 this month to help offset a grocery cost, And so ultimately, you realize that even in the sort of the best idea where like there's none of these harmful repercussions from taxing the rich, which again, I think you explained excellently how that does, right? Like when you tax the rich, they're like, of course it's going to consolidate power to them, and you get all these monstrous side effects and things that end up hurting the weakest. But even if none of those side effects happened, you're still not really doing service to the poor people by taxing the rich and then putting it through this entirely glommed up bureaucratic mush machine that is our government and our spending programs. And it's like, maybe you can get some block grants by the end of it to help some public works things, but even then they don't get to decide where that goes. So maybe it helps their community in a way that they benefit from, maybe it doesn't. Who knows? They don't get to decide. And it's like, I don't know, to me, if there's if people want a public playground, then that community can come together and say, let's fund this as we're each able to. And then the couple who has no kids and they're like, we don't really care about a playground, we're planning on moving, they don't have to contribute to that. But all the people who do need that can meet that need together.
It's that's a great point about how, like, even if we did implement this, it's like, how do you even know if this tax is going to go help the people you're claiming to help? I remember my first job, my boss told me, he's like, hey, like, you're allowed to make, a $1,000 or $5,000 mistake, but if you're going to be making mistakes that are $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, or you're going to make a decision that could have that type of mistake, let me know, because we need to factor that in. And then I think about, like, okay, even when the money does make it to the right place, it makes it to the Pentagon, and then, oh, whoopsie daisy, we don't know where $2 trillion went. It's like, oh, like, no one's gonna get fired, over that. Like I'm like, oh crap, I need to make, in a business, $10,000 is a lot, but for the Pentagon, $2 trillion, like, yeah, I don't know where it went. It's like, people don't realize $2 trillion could make 2 million families $1 million households, right? Like, that's how much money is in $2 trillion. It's 2 million millions. So yeah, it's like, yeah, sure. Even if it's like we could say that taxing would be like an ethical, or like we could stand on from some sort of principle level, like, to do that to someone. It's still not the most effective way to help people. So, like,
exactly,
who cares, man? Like, let's not do that. Let's do something else.
Yeah.
Any more on this one? Oh, sorry, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, again, I still wouldn't agree with it, but I would at least be more sympathetic to the idea of tax the rich and then give it directly back to the poor people, right? Just a direct wealth transfer. But they can't do that because I think they understand that on a gut level, people in the middle understand why that's not fair, and they don't like that. It's like, the poor people might like it because they might say, yeah, they don't need it. But a lot of the middle class people who are working, and they're like, well, I'm trying to get to that upper class that would be taxed. I don't like that you're just directly giving money down, so I think,
or it's just the principle. Maybe they get the principle, and I hope that's the case.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I think that's why people don't advocate for the direct cash transfer, because it's so much more visible in that, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's
Can't get
the case,
away
maybe
with
it's
it.
not. But in terms of, like, the principle of it, I would be more supportive, even though I wouldn't support it, but more supportive of that than what we currently do with our taxes and stuff. In the same way that, like, I don't know, I guess I'm more supportive of Bernie Sanders on foreign policy than I am, Joe Biden. But I'm not very supportive, because when push comes to shove, Bernie's also bad on foreign policy. Oops. Sorry, guys. I hate to break it to you, but he's not good on foreign policy.
He's not. Surprise, surprise. Awesome. Any more on it? I'm good,
Nope,
I think.
we're good.
Cool. Awesome. Well, friends, thanks for hanging with us for the show. If we said anything that made you cringe, be sure to let us know in the comments or via DMs or anything like that. You can catch us at Cringe Post Pod on all socials, Instagram, Twitter, all of that stuff. And we'll be here later this week with more cringes for you, and we'll catch you later.